Hello, I'm Hal Ottaway with the Wichita Postcard Club, and it's time once again for our Wichita Postcard of the Week. This time I want to show you two novelty postcards, and they're novelty because they're really different. Let me show you about them. They're leather, as in cowhide, and these are something that were cut to postcard size, and then they were decorated sometimes with inks or paints, and they're all individual. They're different because they have to almost be handmade, and they would maybe add the name of the town, maybe personalize them at the postcard shop where you were buying them, and they would use a tool kind of like you used to use maybe when you had a wood burning set. You went to craft shop and bought a wood burning set, this hot needle that you could work with on wood, outlining a design. Maybe you were a Cub Scout or a campfire girl and used that sort of thing then. I did, and that's where I learned about pyrography, or this wood burning business. But that's what they did with the postcards too. And so they could write the postcard on the back, maybe a short message, and that's kind of how they're decorated. Another thing about leather postcards, what people did with them, just because they were leather and had some substance, they weren't paper and would tear and be destroyed, but they would take like a hole punch or maybe a nail and hammer and make holes all around the postcard. And then they would get several of these together and could lace them with, like, I don't want to say shoestring or thread or something, but something, maybe a colored thread or a colored fiber sort of thing. But they would lace them, and I've seen them made into a blanket or a quilt. I mean, we're talking about maybe 50 or 60 leather postcards. This was something to do. It was the crafty, it was the macrame of the day. Now we just sit down and watch TV, but it used to be a lot of people were busy crocheting or knitting or doing something with their hands and minds rather than watching television. This is all part of postcard collecting and learning how it was back in 1910, 1915. It was really something, and it was really different. But that was one way that you handled leather postcards that you received. Other times you would put them in a postcard album, and someday I'm going to show you an album with these little cut corners where the postcard would fit in. But leather being supple and everything, it really didn't lend itself to being included in a postcard album. And that leads me to think about one of the problems with collecting leather postcards is that they have like a tannic acid. I think that's the acid that's in the leather itself. And so, just like if you have a leather bookmark and people buy them at gift shops and they bring them home and give them to friends and family and so forth, but leather inside a book is not good. All you have to do is look at where one has been for several years, and you'll see that this tannic acid has leached out from the postcard to the paper, both sides. So if you put it in a book and the tannic acid is in the leather postcard, and it bleeds into both sides of the paper that it's touching in the book. Not good. So that would do the same thing if you had a stack of postcards and you had a leather one or two in there stack. The paper postcards touching that leather on both sides are going to be ruined over time, just with that acid transfer. So what you need to do is to keep leather postcards always in some kind of a postcard sleeve. I use acid-free acetate postcard sleeves. They're purchased easily and not. They're pretty cheap, pretty reasonable at a postcard show, or you could go online and look for postcard sleeves from a hobby supplier for pages or albums, things like that. But at our Wichita Postcard Club each year, there'll be several dealers that will be handling supplies, and that's a good place to pick up several. I buy them on little packs of 100, I think, and they're reasonable and good to have, useful. You'll use them all year long, not just for leather cards, but it's good to put a paper or cardboard postcard inside a sleeve. It keeps our fingerprints, and we have a potato chip or we have a drink or something, pop or whatever, and all of that moisture and transfer with our fingers. That's not good for the paper. It'll help cause problems, moisture transfer to it, and so forth. So take your sleeves and put postcards in them. That's a safe way to store them and to keep them either upright in a box or however you keep your postcard collection. But anyway, let me show you the two postcards that I have. The first one they're both leather, but this is a one that says Wichita, Kansas, up at the upper right corner. And this one has the wood burning and the design of a sunflower, really pretty. And the petals have all been painted, and the brown center of the sunflower, and then the green leaves. And then the background, too, has been painted. And so it's very attractive, very nice. It was mailed to Norman, Oklahoma. And both of these seem to have been mailed by the same person and to the same person in Norman, Oklahoma. I went to school there, and so I have a big fondness and feeling for mail and so forth having to do with Norman, Oklahoma and the University of Oklahoma. But this is the green leather one I wanted to show, and the other one it almost looks like a shoe box. And I say shoes because on the front of it you can read, it says, "Put your shoes in this and come to Wichita, Kansas." And so it's like a shoe box or a case or a little suitcase. It's just something clever that was different, and certainly the recipient probably had never seen anything quite like it. The corners and everything, it's been die cut or cut out, so there's the diagonal corner in the upper right and then the lower left, and you can see that, and then the edges have all been marked with the brown paint or the brown coloring of some sort. On the back of this one, you can see how it's been addressed with a pen and stamped. It cost a penny, just like the other cards to mail during this time. And then it's canceled, Wichita, Kansas, 1907. Remember I told you that during World War I, the government, in order to raise money to help pay for the war, they increased the postage rates to 2 cents for postcards alone. And then after the war was over, it was one of the few times that Congress ever came back and said, well, let's pull back the rate on postcards to a penny, and they did that a couple of years after the war. So that's kind of what the history of when you see a postcard with a 2-cent stamp, chances are it was mailed during World War I or our involvement with that war, which was from 1917 to 1918. And then a lot of the troops didn't make it back home until 1919. You know, they had to go by troop ship, and these were big ships that were commandeered and fitted out for taking all of these men, and no longer the cabins, but a lot of hammocks that people were in, just kind of layered and stacked. You'll see postcards of that too. Postcards are great for discovery and learning and teaching other people about a time or a place, or what happened during those years. Well, those are the two cards that I wanted to show you, and we've talked a little bit about how postcards could be made into a pillow, made into a bedspread. I've just seen both ways, and I'm sorry I don't have one to show you here today, but maybe I'll pick one up here sometime and show you that. But thanks for coming, and I appreciate the notes that you leave on Facebook and on the YouTube experiences, and wish you well, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.